Our relationship was very strong and very serious and very real. We went together for 1 year.
Ann-Margret, the dazzling actress and singer, has long been remembered for her connection with Elvis Presley, the legendary king of rock and roll. Their famous romance has sparked curiosity and speculation for decades. But now, at the age of 84, Ann-Margret has chosen to finally speak openly about their private relationship. In an emotional and candid interview, she shared previously untold stories about her time with Elvis. Moments of passion, laughter, and the hidden struggles they faced together. She revealed truths about their intense connection, the highs and lows, and the tender moments that the world never saw. When stars aligned. It was the spring of 1963, a season when Hollywood shimmered brighter than ever. The city pulsed with color, glamour, and restless dreams. Movie sets glittered beneath the California sun, cameras flashed endlessly, and the air buzzed with laughter and ambition. Every studio lot throbbed with life as directors barked instructions, grips wheeled heavy equipment, and makeup artists rushed between trailers. The stars of that golden era glided through backlots like royalty, their faces known across continents, their every gesture whispered about in the glossy pages of film magazines. Amid this dazzling storm stood Ann-Margret, the Swedish-born sensation whose name was fast becoming the talk of Tinseltown. Young, radiant, and filled with untamed energy, she seemed to carry the spark of something new. Just a few years earlier, she had been an unknown girl with a fiery grin and big dreams. Now, after her unforgettable turn in Bye Bye Birdie, she was Hollywood's newest obsession. Critics called her a star in the making, and studios lined up to cast her in their next big pictures. Then came the call that would change everything. She had been chosen to co-star in Viva Las Vegas. It would be a musical packed with rhythm, color, and charm. But what truly made her heart race was her co-star, the most famous man alive, Elvis Presley. The announcement alone set the entertainment world ablaze. The thought of pairing the king of rock and roll with Hollywood's rising flame seemed almost too perfect to be true. The first day on set was charged with anticipation. Lights were adjusted, music rehearsed, and the director's voice echoed across the stage. Then the noise faded as the door opened and Elvis Presley walked in. Dressed simply, yet radiating confidence, he moved with an ease that drew every eye. Conversation stopped. A quiet thrill rippled through the crew as his smile filled the room with that unmistakable magnetism. From across the set, Ann-Margret watched him, curious, poised, and a little breathless. The instant their eyes met, something shifted. It wasn't loud or showy. It was quiet, but undeniable. The moment hung between them, charged with an energy neither could quite explain. For a heartbeat, the entire studio seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them under the blazing lights. When filming began, their connection exploded on screen. Every dance, every glance felt alive, effortless, electric. They laughed between takes, sharing jokes, teasing one another, discovering unexpected similarities. They both loved fast motorcycles, lively music, and the thrill of performance. Beneath all the laughter, something deeper stirred, a bond neither fame nor caution could disguise. People noticed. The director saw it in the way their scenes flowed too naturally. The crew felt it in the air, and soon the tabloids began to hum with speculation. "They're supposed to be playing lovers," one cameraman whispered, "but I think the film's just catching the surface of what's real." Elvis, already a legend, carried the weight of endless adoration that often left him alone. Ann-Margret, still new to fame, brought warmth and a playful spirit that made people feel lighter just by being near her. Together, they were fire and melody, opposites in harmony. As rehearsals went on, the boundaries between acting and reality blurred. Their laughter was genuine. Their smiles lingered longer. Their eyes spoke volumes that dialogue couldn't. The cameras caught glimpses of that magic, but the true story unfolded off-screen, in glances shared between takes, in conversations that stretched long after everyone had gone home. By the final weeks of shooting, something undeniable had formed between them. It wasn't fleeting, it was real, powerful, and quietly understood. The gossip outside grew louder, but they kept their silence, hiding their feelings behind professionalism. Yet anyone watching closely could see the truth written across their faces. When the director finally called "cut" for the last time, the air in the soundstage felt heavy, filled with a bittersweet ache. The film was done, but what had sparked between them was only beginning. The lights dimmed, the crew packed up, and the echoes of laughter faded into quiet. Something had changed forever. What started as a movie had become something more, a moment of fate neither of them could have scripted. And from that day on, their story, one of passion, artistry, and impossible timing, began to write itself beyond the screen. The Hidden Flame. The bright lights of the Viva Las Vegas set had barely faded before something deeper began to take root between Elvis Presley and Ann-Margret. What started as playful chemistry for the cameras quietly grew into something real, secret, tender, and impossible to ignore. Their laughter, once written in the script, began to sound genuine. Their eyes met longer than they should have. What began as make-believe soon slipped into truth. Away from the flashing lights, they found comfort in each other's presence. The world around them was loud and demanding. Filled with pressure, neither could escape. But when it was just the two of them, time seemed to pause. They shared quiet dinners in hidden hotel rooms and late-night drives through the glowing streets of Las Vegas, city lights dancing across their faces. Sometimes they parked far from the noise, listening to the whispering desert wind while they spoke of everything fame had taken from them: peace, privacy, and the rare gift of being truly understood. Ann-Margret came to know the side of Elvis that few ever saw. Behind the charm and the legend was a man both kind and lonely. He spoke of the pressure that never let go, the tours, the image he had to protect, the burden of being the king of rock and roll. Ann-Margret, in turn, shared her own worries of being misunderstood, of losing herself in Hollywood's glittering maze. Sometimes their laughter said what words couldn't. In that shared laughter, they both found a quiet peace. They were different. She was fiery and spontaneous, while he carried a gentle sadness shaped by fame's shadow. Yet their connection felt effortless. They didn't have to act anymore. In the still hours of the night, Elvis would sit by the piano, his fingers tracing soft melodies, and Ann-Margret would rest her head on his shoulder, listening. Often they didn't speak at all. Silence became their language, a language that said everything. But even the most beautiful moments carry a shadow. Elvis was still bound to Priscilla, the young woman waiting for him in Memphis. Their relationship was no secret, and he knew the duty that came with it. Each time his name appeared in the papers beside Ann-Margret's, the whispers grew louder. Reporters began to follow them, outside hotels, around movie sets, hoping to capture a glimpse of the truth. There were close calls, a flash of a camera in the dark, a phone call that almost reached the wrong person. The pull between love and obligation began to weigh on Elvis. He was torn between what his heart wanted and what his world demanded. For Ann-Margret, it was a bittersweet ache, loving a man who could never truly be hers. She didn't love the legend or the fame. She loved the man who laughed softly, who cared deeply, who longed for a simple, ordinary life. But deep down, she knew she could never have all of him. Their ending came quietly. No arguments, no goodbyes in the rain, just silence. One evening, after days of distance, the phone rang. The moment she heard his voice, she knew. It was soft, hesitant, filled with weight. He spoke slowly, carefully, saying it had to end. The world would never understand. There were promises he couldn't break. When the call ended, Ann-Margret sat for a long time, surrounded by the kind of silence that hurts. Weeks passed. She poured herself into her work again. To the world, she sparkled, smiling for cameras, posing for magazines, performing with her usual fire. But behind that brilliance was a quiet ache she never spoke of. When news broke of Elvis's marriage to Priscilla, she saw the pictures printed in glossy pages. The smiling couple, the perfect story. Her name appeared just a few lines away. She looked at the photograph with tears she never allowed to fall. Her career soared. The applause grew louder, brighter. Yet sometimes, during a show, she'd hear an Elvis song floating faintly from a radio backstage, a melody wrapped in memory. For a second, her breath would catch, her eyes would shine, and she would feel that ache again. Then she'd smile, lift her chin, and keep performing. The picture of grace the world expected her to be. Years slipped by, but memories like that never truly fade. The late-night drives, the laughter, the quiet understanding. They stayed with her like a song she could never forget. She never spoke about it in interviews, but those close to her could see it in her eyes whenever his name was mentioned. Even after the years turned to decades, his voice never left her. It lived in her memories, in the soft hum of a record playing somewhere in the distance, in the quiet pauses between her thoughts. For Ann-Margret, what they shared was never just a fleeting romance. It was something sacred, a secret love written not in words, but in silence, between two hearts that once moved in perfect time. Whispers that never faded. Even after their romance ended, something between Elvis Presley and Ann-Margret quietly lived on. It wasn't loud or meant for the world to see. It existed in silence, tender, private, and deeply personal. Though life carried them down different roads, a quiet thread seemed to keep them connected, one that neither distance nor passing years could break. After Elvis married Priscilla, and Ann-Margret continued her shining journey through Hollywood, most believed their story had reached its final page. Yet behind the glamour and headlines, subtle gestures told a different tale. Each time Ann-Margret prepared for a new performance or television special, a familiar bouquet would arrive, always stunning, always perfectly timed. The card was blank, but she never needed a name. She always knew who it was from. It became their unspoken ritual, a way to say what words no longer could. No letters, no calls, only flowers. Each arrangement carried a memory, a quiet acknowledgement, a message that only they understood. As the years slipped by and the world evolved, the flowers continued to appear. To everyone else, they were tokens from an admirer. But to her, they were whispers from the past, gentle proof that he still remembered. The press, hungry for stories, often tried to revive the rumors. They hinted that their connection had never faded, that something still lingered between them. Reporters asked, writers speculated, but neither ever confirmed a word. Elvis never spoke of it, and Ann-Margret, always poised with that calm smile, found graceful ways to deflect the questions. Her silence became its own language, loyal, private, and full of meaning. Over time, that silence became a mystery the world could never solve. Why did she never tell their story? Some believed it was loyalty. Others said it was love too deep to share. A few thought it was pain she refused to reopen. Whatever the reason, she guarded those memories as something sacred, a treasure no one else could touch. When she did speak of him, it was only briefly, a few tender words that revealed just enough to stir the imagination. What they shared had gone beyond romance. It was spiritual, something rare and pure, belonging only to them. As the years went on and her life moved forward, the flowers arrived faithfully, until one day they didn't. It was August of 1977, the day Elvis Presley passed away. That silence said more than any message ever could. For Ann-Margret, it was the end of an unspoken promise that had lasted for years. Yet even without the flowers, she felt him near, in the music that played softly at night, in the echoes of memory, in the moments when the world grew still. The mystery of their bond remained untouched, eternal. She never tried to explain it, perhaps because it couldn't be explained. It was love, friendship, and something beyond both, a hidden connection that endured long after the music had faded. Deep in her heart, she carried it always, waiting for the day she might finally have the strength to tell it all. How strong was their bond, really? Let's look deeper. When the music fell silent. It was August of 1977, and the warm air hung softly over Lake Tahoe. Ann-Margret was there, dazzling crowds with her live shows, radiant, graceful, and full of energy. To her audience, she was the same vibrant star they had always admired, untouchable, glowing, larger than life. But that night, everything changed. The evening began as usual. Backstage, laughter mingled with the sound of musicians tuning their instruments. Ann-Margret stood before her mirror, adjusting her costume, her auburn hair catching the glow of the lights. The band was ready, the audience restless, the curtain moments away from rising. Then suddenly, a stagehand rushed into her dressing room, face pale, voice trembling. He whispered a few words that froze her completely. Elvis Presley, the man who had once filled her world with warmth and music, was gone. He had been found lifeless in his home at Graceland earlier that day. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The sound of the crowd outside vanished into silence. The air grew heavy, as if every memory they had shared suddenly returned at once. She tried to breathe, to stay steady, but the weight of the news was unbearable. When the curtain finally rose and the spotlight hit her, she took one step forward and collapsed. Gasps filled the theater. The show was halted. Her team rushed to her side, gently carrying her away as confusion swept through the crowd. That night's performance never resumed. Later, back in her dressing room, she sat alone. The walls were quiet, but her heart echoed with his laughter, his voice, his music. On her table, where flowers always waited before every show, there was nothing. For years, the same anonymous bouquet had arrived before her performances, beautiful and silent. But tonight, the table was empty. That absence told her everything. She sat there for a long time, staring at the space where the flowers should have been. Memories came flooding back. The nights they laughed until dawn, the songs he played just for her, the still moments that belonged to no one else. The man who had brought so much light into her world had gone silent forever. In the days that followed, the world grieved loudly. Crowds gathered outside Graceland, candles burned through the night, and newspapers printed his name across every headline. But Ann-Margret stayed quiet. Her sorrow was her own, personal, private, and far from the cameras. When she finally went to Graceland, it was after the mourners had gone. The mansion was peaceful, surrounded by flowers and silence. She walked slowly through the gates, her heart heavy, her eyes full of memories. When she reached his resting place, the sun was dipping low, casting a golden light across the stones. There were no reporters, no sound, only the soft whisper of wind through the trees. Ann-Margret stood there for a long time, remembering the laughter they shared on film sets, the private moments when fame didn't matter. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a single red rose. Gently, she placed it down. Some say she left a note with it, though no one ever knew what it said. Others believe she left only tears. Whatever it was, it carried every unspoken word she'd kept for years. Love, gratitude, and a final, quiet goodbye. When she turned to leave, the evening sky glowed in soft amber light. The wind brushed past her hair as if carrying one last melody from long ago. It was a peaceful sadness, the kind that stays forever, but no longer hurts the same way. Years of grace and quiet strength. As the years rolled on, Ann-Margret continued to shine, not with the blinding glare of fame, but with a calm, steady glow of her own. She had endured heartbreak, the dizzy height of stardom, and the constant noise of Hollywood. Her beauty still captivated, but it was her grace, her quiet resilience, that truly defined her. She built a life not anchored in the past, but strengthened by it, holding close the memories that shaped her, yet never allowing them to dictate her path. When she married Roger Smith, the talented actor and producer, the world looked on with curiosity. Many wondered whether anyone could ever fill the space that Elvis Presley had once occupied in her heart. But Roger offered her something entirely different: peace. He cherished her not as a glamorous celebrity, but as the woman behind the fame. He became her partner, her protector, her calm in the storm. Together, they built something rare, a marriage that lasted 50 beautiful years, a bond almost unheard of in Hollywood's ever-changing world. In this chapter of her life, Ann-Margret flourished. She acted in new films, graced countless stages, and accepted awards, yet never let the spotlight consume her. She found balance, happiness grounded in privacy, and a companionship that gave her heart room to breathe. Their love lived quietly, far from flashing bulbs and public speculation. Still, whispers of the past never faded completely. Reporters often brought up Elvis, hoping for hidden stories or emotional confessions. Each time she simply smiled, that soft, knowing smile, and gently redirected the question. She never spoke of him, not even when documentaries, authors, and journalists pleaded for her words. Her silence wasn't coldness or regret, it was reverence. To her, some moments in life are too sacred to share. Perhaps she feared that speaking of him would somehow betray what they once had. Their bond, though brief in time, had been filled with laughter, honesty, and a kind of tenderness few could understand. They were two young souls caught between fame and feeling, between stage lights and stillness. For her, that love belonged to a time no one else could ever touch. So, she tucked it away carefully, not to erase it, but to protect it. Through the years, her silence became her language of strength. It told its own story, one of dignity, loyalty, and a woman who had truly lived and yet chosen grace over gossip. While others wrote books and gave interviews about Elvis, her silence echoed louder than any voice ever could. As the decades passed, her beauty softened, but her spirit never dimmed. She carried herself with that same gentle elegance, always kind, always composed. But behind her calm smile, there lingered a quiet tenderness, an echo of a love that had once burned bright and faded too soon. Those who knew her well swore they could see it, the flicker in her eyes whenever one of his songs played, or whenever his name was softly mentioned. Time may move forward, but the heart never forgets completely. The woman who had danced through decades of fame still carried within her the memory of the man who once changed everything. Though she built a joyful, full life of her own, rich with love and laughter, there remained one small, silent corner of her heart that was his alone, untouched and eternal. Now, at 84, as the world around her slows and the days grow gentler, something inside her begins to stir. Perhaps it's time. Time to open that quiet corner of her heart, not out of sorrow, but out of peace. What will she reveal? Let's find out. The quiet truth. Time, in its gentle way, brings every story full circle. For Ann-Margret, now 84, the years have flowed like calm waves, carrying her through joy, loss, and reflection. The bright lights of her youth have softened into a warm glow, and the applause that once filled her life now drifts like a distant echo. Yet one name, one memory still hums softly through it all: Elvis Presley. For decades, she had chosen silence. Reporters asked, writers speculated, fans wondered, but she always smiled that graceful smile and let their questions fade. Her silence was never secrecy, it was protection. What they shared belonged to no one else. But in this late chapter of her life, she finally feels ready. Not to expose a scandal or reopen old wounds, but to honor something precious, something that quietly shaped her heart and never truly left. When she finally spoke, her words came gently, like whispers carried on the wind. Each syllable seemed to hold the weight of unspoken years. There was no bitterness, only gratitude, the kind that comes from remembering something pure. She spoke of Elvis as if he were still nearby, as if time had not stretched 4 long decades between them. She described not the icon adored by millions, but the man behind the myth, kind, funny, thoughtful, and deeply human. She remembered how easily he could make her laugh, how his eyes softened when the cameras turned away, and how much he cared for the people around him. Fame never stripped away his tenderness. Beneath the glittering suits and the roar of the crowd, there was a searching soul, vulnerable, compassionate, and sometimes lonely. She saw that side of him, the side few ever glimpsed, and she never forgot it. Their bond, she explained, was never only about romance. It was deeper. Two performers at the peak of fame, finding peace in each other's understanding. They shared jokes, long conversations, and moments of silence that spoke volumes. It wasn't just love. It was connection, a spiritual kinship that existed quietly beyond the world's gaze. As she spoke, it became clear why she had stayed silent all these years. The world has a way of twisting tenderness into headlines, but Ann-Margret refused to let that happen. To her, What they had was sacred, a memory too beautiful to be turned into gossip. She hadn't hidden it out of shame, but out of love. For nearly half a century, she had guarded it like a delicate flame, protecting it from the winds of curiosity. She confessed she never once regretted their time together, nor the fact that their lives had gone separate ways. They had loved, they had laughed, and when the moment came, they parted, not in bitterness, but with warmth and understanding. Some stories, she said, don't need dramatic endings. They live quietly, shaping who we become. Her voice softened, like someone watching the last rays of sunlight fade over a still lake. There was peace in her eyes, not sadness. The years had taught her that love, even when brief, can echo across a lifetime. She looked around her cozy living room, filled with photos, awards, and memories, and paused on one particular frame near her bed. Inside was an old black and white photo of two young stars smiling at each other, the world disappearing between them. She lifted the photo carefully, tracing his face with gentle fingers. It had traveled with her through decades and homes, the edges yellowed by time. To her, it was timeless. She whispered a few quiet words, ones only she and Elvis would ever understand. Maybe it was a farewell that had never been spoken, or perhaps a simple thank you. As she placed the frame back down, a soft breeze stirred the curtains. For a moment, it felt like music, fading, but still alive, the last note of a song that refuses to end. Ann-Margret has lived a life of brilliance, grace, and resilience. She has known triumphs and heartbreak, yet always chose compassion over regret. Even now, her light remains, her fiery red hair now turned silver, her smile serene but just as radiant. Time hasn't dimmed her glow, it has deepened it. Her voice, once bright with youth, now carries wisdom and peace. The world may still see her as a legend, but she knows herself simply as Anne, the woman who once danced beside Elvis and shared a bond untouched by fame. There's no sorrow in her memories now, only gratitude. Gratitude for the love they once shared and the lessons it left behind. Sometimes his music still plays in her home, softly, like a ghost from the past. When it does, she closes her eyes, smiles, and lets the melody take her back, not to stardom or heartbreak, but to that quiet connection they once knew. As the interview draws to a close, the room settles into silence. Outside, the sun dips low, painting the world in gold. Ann-Margret looks once more at that photograph, her heart full, her mind still. The story she guarded for so long has finally been spoken, not to reopen old wounds, but to close them with grace. What do you think about Ann-Margret's heartfelt confession? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more celebrity stories and behind-the-scenes tales. And before you go, check out the other videos on your screen. There's plenty more fascinating stories waiting for you.